do you want your books to be there? Because they're right when you enter, where the other books are. Hello, everybody. What a lovely turnout. My name is Mariam Zohra, and I'm your host tonight. This is a Surrey Muse's in real life gathering since 2020, and the first of the year of the cycle. And how our program is that we have a featured author, poet, 20 minutes each, and we have 10 minutes discourse right after each presenter. And then we have a 15-minute break, and then our featured performer or musician presents, and then we have emerging artists that read for 10 minutes each, and then we have the open mic sheet there. So if you sign up, you can do open mic, and that's how we'll end. And I want to thank you for such a lovely turnout. And yes, let's get to poster.
Yes.
Okay, so we have featured author Marian Dodds today. We have featured poet Kevin Spenst. And I think it's via Skype that will have our visual artist Omokanye Adetona. And then, so that'll be right after the break. And then we'll have emerging musician Hayley Verrall, and then emerging writer Veronika Gorlova, who's right there. And I urge you to sign up for open mic. You don't. It's 3 to 5 minutes, not too much to fill. All right. So let me introduce Kevin to you. Kevin Spenst is a poet and educator who has published Ignite, Jabbering with Bing Bong, and Hearts Amok, a memoir in verse, all with Anvil Press, and I believe they're right there. So do at break time get a signed copy, support the author. And and over a dozen chapbooks, including Surrey sonnets, append, and a videotape swaddled in purple wool. I do love that title. He writes a chapbook column in Subterranean magazine and is an occasional co-host for Wax Poetic on Co-op Radio. He teaches poetry at Simon Fraser University and lives in Vancouver on unceded Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories. Please welcome Kevin.
Thank you for that introduction, and thank you so much for coming out. It's so great to see so many familiar faces, and wow. I have 20 minutes to read, and I think they also say reading and Q&A, right? So that's also part of that 20 minutes. Right after the 20 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to pack your 20 minutes with poetry, and I'll do little preambles here and there, though, I mean, this morning when I was thinking about the preambles, I was like, well, is that a preamble or is that a tangent? But you know, it all goes into the poetry, and you'll understand as I speak like in prose, you'll be like, that doesn't quite make sense, but then I'll read my poems, and you're like, oh, it all kind of fits together in a weird way. So I'd like to begin with a quote from Ai Weiwei, the Chinese dissident visual artist. And I really love this quote. To experience poetry is to see over and above reality. It is to discover that which is beyond the physical, to experience another life and another level of feeling. And I love that because, you know, that's what I think a lot of us seek in poetry. You know, there's the day-to-day and the little kind of hassles and the little emotional knots. But then in poems, suddenly those knots kind of are pulled out and revealed as something different, and I love that. I also wanted to begin with a quote from Surrey's first and so far only poet laureate, Renee Saklikar. There's this interview with her, and she says that for her, Surrey, quote, shape shifts its terrain into and away and around me all the time. And that quote is true for me as well. Coming here from Vancouver, taking the SkyTrain, the last kind of section here, taking the SkyTrain, and I'm like, that's where my niece was born, in a house that's no longer there. And just in the field that replaced it for a while, Fozzie and I were in a photo shoot, I think it was 6 years ago. Right? So there are all these kind of weird memories piled up on top of one another. So what do you do with all these memories? Well, you turn them into poetry. And for me, I turned them into a book called Hearts Amok, a memoir in verse. And these are Surrey poems, sort of. It's sort of Surrey, but maybe it's above Surrey in some ways. It's Surrey, but it's also Surrey, England. And it's kind of chivalric. And here's the first poem in the collection. I also added this as a bookmark for one of the books if you're interested. I did some sewing just for this one. It's called Apologia from Hoboken Christendom. If my metaphors unmake her allegorical gusto, gambling mouth, glasses glinting high to the sun, sword-sung questions, somersault quests, tongue that probes teeth or truth, if she fails to stroll before you, glaze mezcal-tinted subtleties, grow blueberries from abandoned moats, craft sites for queens and gunsels, transmogrify your hands to maps, mosey off of her own accord, you can blame my sing-song spatchcock, my bindle-stick stock of words, my tin ear for heating metallurgy of the dead, blame my wingding displays of old flames, my possum water eyes, my cloudily enraptured brain, for I wandered lonely as a clod, a night of the road, took my solarettes off at the trash can blaze, and I swear she's in a note above odds bodkins and train whistles, in a song sustained around the jackalope roast, until infinity flat lines for broke. So there's a lot there. You'll want to get the book. You want to read it again. You're like, what's that? So a little bit of language from the Middle Ages. There's also some hobo slang kind of thrown in. And it all makes sense if you kind of look through the book. There are two other poems I'll read from this. And these are definitely growing up in Surrey kind of memories and thinking of, waiting for the bus on Fraser Highway and just kind of being kind of down and out as a teenager, sort of. And this is called In the Boxcar of Surrey, around Guildford Castle. At 9, Dante was done in by a twist's divinity. Within this love at first sigh, he upturned a golden vocation, a map through exile. At a Kirby Christmas party, I fell for a girl at 4. Barely a blip for a courtship, we froze into a one-night slow dance in a Polaroid. Out of my depths at 12, blinded by Mariah gauze, I blanched. A towering 20-year-old, she took me horseback riding, my arms the gladdest they could be. Soon after, some yegg wooed my sister's friend away. Heart sick, I sought a coeval, but my fervor bore a fever that chased angels away. In my dreams, we undid class, pilfered the big bedroom of stars. From shag rug eruptions, I followed the thorn birds whirled down under, boo-hooed out the bazoo for unmatchable love. The Thornbirds, a TV series from the 70s, 80s, and it was so heartbreaking, and I remember crying, blubbering, and my mom's like, what did I produce? Who is this? What do I do with all these emotions? This is called a goat herd's palaver, clackety-clacks. In those alpine times of youthful feelings, our hearts yodeled blandishments of agony. To make Moore's worse, I learned in church that unless I paced a fine line following choice Bible verses, I'd be dicing a bad order to hell. At 14, I prayed for the gaze of the new girl whose mullet jostled like a roller coaster. I dreamt a song of Solomon, her cheeks spun like roller skates in the Wally stardust. Her mascara as occluding as Phoenix metaphysical books, her hair a stage for heavy metal quakes and pyroclastics. I sweated hours into drawing her flowers of my affections. Prayers unanswered, my soul slouched into an Iron Maiden forgery. So those are some Hearts Amok poems, and yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. The book came out at the beginning of the pandemic, so it was an odd sort of thing, excitement, anticipation, and then I remember looking at a venue as a possible book launch, and then, of course, all that was shut down. So it's great to be able to read it to an audience, so thank you again for your attention. So I also love, well, I like, of course, poetry, and, where does poetry find its fit and form? People write online these days, and poems go up here and there. That's cool. Traditionally, we think of the book. Everybody wants the book. But there are these things called chap books, and these are smaller books of poetry. And I've really been fascinated by chap books for quite a while, and just the idea of being able to make something really quickly. And then you make it, and then it goes out into the world. So I've written a number of chap books as well. And I was lucky enough to have 3 chap books published recently. And so I'll be reading from some of these. And this is a videotape swaddled in purple wool. And it's with 845 Press, which is out of London, Ontario. And it begins, and there's this Sol the clown, who's a Quebecois kind of figure. It graces the cover. And we'll hear a little bit more from him later, I think. And this is a poem that opens it. It's great to have a chapbook because then you order your poems, you arrange them, you're like, how does this fit? And then after the fact, when I read this, I got this, I was like, do I want this book to begin with this poem? I'll read it to you now. Just keep in mind, this probably isn't the best first poem in the book. But, it's just thinking about, it's being critical and questioning and wondering, being suspicious. On the origins of the species, our lungs were once wings which, under millions of years of weighted words, took flight from fancy, and here I am, winded and grounded, wondering what we might have been. But you are my guest here, under these gusts of wayward blows, and what I meant to say under this evolution of blues that I will make up as much as I can in pleasure and honesty for you. This is surprising my face on my cracked iPhone. The secret to my happiness, which is tenuous at times, hoisted a little more slowly each morning, and some might say tattered, as it is for all who have gone without close company for days, that drag their untouchable heels, leaving furrows around our hearts, which beat online, it's true, but equidistantly true is that they don't, circulating Ptolemaically, as is their wont, into the phantom limbs of dead longings, raising up into our own brows vexillology to wave from across the desert to a stranger who was once a sort of lover. How I miss you. Oh God, how we miss. It's so simple. I read from this chapbook at the Massey Art Society. It was kind of the official launch a little while ago, and I kind of planned the evening to have a serious poem and a wild and woolly poem. So this is a poem that I've read many times, but that night I realized its true wild and woolly potential. So it's kind of a musical. So this is, it will rain like rods on the hillside in Sweden. And the poem makes use of idioms for heavy rain from different languages around the world. It will rain, married men in Spain, and intermittent toads' beards Saturday morning in Portugal. An intense Pacific frontal system of bamboo, grass, and sand will fall over Tokyo. There's a chance of young cobblers developing over Berlin and running riot across the country, all the way to Athens, where they will fall Sunday afternoon alongside chair legs. In Nantes, it's currently raining nails. In Grenoble, it's Renouille, ropes and reams, and York is getting nailed. Cows are pissing lightly over Paris. In the north of Taipei, plums will plummet Monday morning. There's a strong chance of fire and sulfur over Reykjavik, which will reek of burnt umbrellas for weeks. In Bangkok, it will rain children's eyes and ears shut for a month, and then they will open and be quizzed like little winds on all the directions of the sky. Thank you. So this is in that up and down kind of way of things. This is called stepping into the outline of strangers' secrets, I think. Yeah, here it is. This is a sonnet, formally. Stepping into the outlines of strangers' secrets. And a lot of these poems I wrote after a breakup, and I'd moved into this new place in the West End of Vancouver, and it was the pandemic. So what do you do but write poems? I think a lot of poetry and literature has come out of that period of time. In the majority of heartbreak cases, including those we pass on busy streets, what we don't know won't kill us, and that their father's suicide has kept them cautious around corners, that his grandparents' close call across a border still keeps him on edge, that her washing of a bodum today brought tears and the tenderness of handling glass like a face, and that they haven't seen their granddaughter in a year aches away developmentally in stages, means more than we can know, yet we continue, people watching, people hoping, people dreaming, because elongated exceptions are all we have to learn around. This is called the histrionics of theater's greatest deluges, and it begins with a quote from Sol, or Marc Favreau, and he says, "J'aime jouer les loques, les farfelus, les détraqués." And so he said, I like to play the part of the clowns and fools and kind of the crazies, he says. When did we divide into performer and bums shifting in and over seats? I mean, a mostly comfortable spot did division on its own, counting on us to be part of the stumble around from tree to savanna, seeds starring at our heels. How we've been props for the world's other micro-pièces de théâtre is disputable only by the few who care about diddly squat, i.e. boosterism's clutch of dollars and fevered sense and its feverish ideologies. You and I, mon chum, we hold each other here in the corner, quaking like stagehands about to be fired out of a cannon for intermission entertainment and debts owing. In the darkness, we cave in to reflections of yore. We etch what we once slanged, argoed, and why we are not done for. We can shimmy out of our hobo duds, even in this tight squeeze, and rewrite the words around our species of survival, even with only minutes left. The tiniest of troughs will be likened to unseen color patterns of the future, as if all the hopes were one hope with its edits, ampersanding heartbeats along another quick costume change. And that's for a poem. I wrote this poem for a friend, Jeff, who passed last year. And this is, here's a poem that I love, and I don't know why it wasn't published in whatever magazine I sent it off to. But, you know, who cares? You love these poems. They're like children, and maybe other people don't appreciate them for all their, you're excited to share them with other people. So this is a prayer to the dissenter. I picked up this biography of the poet William Blake, who's kind of an eccentric figure in the history of English literature. His wife complained that he spent more time talking to the angels up in his kind of workroom than he did with her or other people. He was unique. In his biography, I came across this fantastic story of how his father, who beat him quite incessantly, took him to an engraver to be apprenticed. And then afterwards, he was like, young William Blake, who was probably a strange child, was like, he has the face of a man about to be hanged. And according to this biography, he was the last man to be hanged in England as a punishment. So this is a prayer to the dissenter. The anus of an angel is a star, scrawled young William Blake on the Covent Garden jakes of a stipple engraver whose face wore the look of a man about to be hanged, all of which Blake told his father after their inquiry into an apprenticeship that was not to be. Long after Blake took his beatings, the stipple engraver rose to fame as the last to die from the Tyburn hanging tree. At the age of 10, as far as ever Blake could saunter outside London, he looked up into the darksome air, into tree boughs swaying under cherubic wings, his home report bringing him closer to another purpling. Did those Blows glitter out in pain sidereal, a private aurora. Young Blake, old Blake, dead Blake, however you transpire from room to room, shuffling out the creaks from old pains, gift us again through your visions, rushlit and ribbled, eyes ever upon us, the capacity to tear the world a new one. And I also wanted to read from another brand new off the press chapbook, which I co-wrote with my nephew, whose parents are here today. And it was so fun to connect, albeit over a Google Doc. He lives in Montreal. And he asked me to send him a poem. And I was like, oh. And he's like, send me a poem. I'm going to work with it. I'm going to do something to it. And I didn't quite understand at first what he would do, but I sent him a poem, and then he reworked it linguistically, studying all these things at university. And then I sent him another poem, and back and forth, and then a manuscript developed. So this is with Collusion Books out of Halifax. They only publish collaboratively written work. It's kind of a really cool operation that they have. And so this will be my last poem today, and this is called, and they're all kind of anagrams in some sense or another. The title here, A Prayer for R. Offre Arpa, can be read both ways. And you may find yourself living in a shotgun shack, a line from the Talking Heads. The sun bursts through cloudage from an angle, prying people unawares. These rays archive a history of angels. Eyelids closed under sunlight seal the brightest blessings. We are this patchwork of blotches and colors at our core, disintegrating into the demands of a life that spreads us thin. Soon the city adds a squinting of commuters and traffic reports, the aging disembark. For one janitor whose cleaning of toilets is made tolerable by anosmia, a podcast sweeps him along. Babylonian demons served as models for medieval painters' mosaics of cherubim, seraphim, and other ranks somewhere backstage. On a prolonged coffee break, a bus driver prays under a passenger's reversed glare for her niece in the hospital. In an office tower, someone staggers under a sudden lifted loss. Others settle into thinking they know what they're feeling. Clouds take the shape of crouching rabbits. When our shadows share true north, it's our intimate sequence. Duck shapes crouch the clouds. Feeling what we know unsettles thinkers. Loss lifted suddenly, someone towers off their gate. Few reverse the glare of the inhospitable, yarps the street corner prophet. Backstage somewhere, cherubim, seraphim, and Babylonian demons rank medieval painters based on their mosaics. A podcast about janitors whose toilet cleaning is made tolerable by their inability to smell is soon swept away. An ad barks and disses how squinting commits you to aging. Undemanded of the disintegrating life, we can spread out thin. Our core colors us in blotches that build out a patchwork. Blessings, brightest seals, light underneath closed eyelids, where an angel's story of archives raises unaware people from a prying angle. The sun bursts through cloudage. All right, thank you so much for your attention. So it's Q&A time. So let's talk. So does anyone have any questions? Oh yeah, Fazia. Yeah, so your question is, how do they influence each other? How are they different to me? Yeah, well, I want to say I started kind of as a performer, but that's not really true. I mean, in elementary school here in Surrey, I remember doing speeches. That was kind of a fun, I liked doing public speeches, and I was doing that a lot. And actually, one of my first speeches was about my niece who was born kind of just here, and I was 10 years old, and it was exciting. So I did a public speech for the school. And so there I was kind of writing with the intent to kind of present and sort of perform. And I did a lot of theater growing up, and then I wrote kind of on the side. And I guess there's sort of a balance of the two, the balance being in part the attention, the time that you have. If you have no time, you just perform because there's no time to prepare, in a sense. And you know, and then some people who are writing and writing, and maybe they're perfectionists, they may never read their work because they don't feel they kind of it's ready or somehow. So there's that, you know, those are two rough approximations of their relationship. But for me, I read, and it's kind of an articulation of just the voices in my head and the voices kind of circulating and kind of nailing something down and getting something solid and concrete. Often I'll read out loud when editing, so near the last stage, or at least I have a very clear voice in my head. And then when I read, it's a pleasure to kind of to make discoveries sometimes. And so as a, you know, for example, the launch of this chapbook, it was interesting to read it, thinking about the presentation, and then being like, oh, these kind of alternate serious, and I can extend the other kind of the next poem into something silly or fun or ridiculous. And then, of course, a poem can be read in so many different ways. And I think that's also a reflection of the poem itself, as this thing that's read by people in many different ways. So as a reader, you know, you are giving one interpretation, and it might be one of your interpretations. But it's also kind of an interesting challenge to think, like, how else can I read this poem for other people? Thanks for asking. Sure.
I was wondering, because there is such like a silly and serious tone to your writing, is the mood that you're in when you're writing reflective of the poem?
Oof, I don't think so. I mean, maybe a sliver of it is, but then I think the poem takes over. So yeah, I think you know, some poems can start in that mood. So I mean, there are pandemic poems that are the beginning of heartbreak, and there's kind of this sadness that is evident, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. And I think some poems can begin with just, you know, this line or kind of this feeling, and then it becomes something else. Or at least I hope that's the case. Thanks for asking.
Just about the role of, how would you define the role of Surrey in your poetry? I mean, obviously, it's important, it's present in a number of the poems, but I wonder how you see it. Is Surrey kind of a coincidence of your existence, or is it somehow essential to your creative process?
Thanks for asking. That's a great question. Is Surrey accidental or essential to my kind of existence as a human being? I'd say it's pretty essential and foundational in many ways. It's accidental by just, you know, biology and birth and these different things. It was really the Portman Bridge and the building of it that led to my family. In 1965, I think they were in the longest traffic jam in BC history. Everybody wanted to cross the bridge. It's the first day of the opening. So they crossed the bridge, and then they were like, let's drive around Surrey. And, oh, there's a for sale kind of place. So they made the move from Burnaby or wherever. And so there's kind of an accident of sorts. But then you're born in this place. And so for me, it feels that all the questions of, like, growing up are so kind of embedded in places that if they don't exist anymore, exist in my memory, and then my memory is kind of, you know, and then I look at the place now, and so there's a funny kind of dissonance there. And so then I have to also write not only in response to my memory, but also that change. And then I have to kind of come up with a vocabulary, or I feel it's important to create a vocabulary that can kind of connect those layers of history. And so that's why I dig into history with Hearts Amok, and I'm curious to know about the history of Surrey, England, because here we have the colonial kind of, you know, cookie cutter print of, like, Surrey, England, and here it is. So there's also that history of colonialism and stuff. And then the memories of going to Surrey, to Guildford Place, you know, are pretty foundational. Like, it's exciting, like first movie and all these different things in the context of Surrey. So I think it's quite important intellectually thinking about things, and then also just an emotional kind of connection to place. Yeah. Thanks.
When you write poetry, is it situational, or do you just sit down and think about what you're going to write, or does it just come out of the blue and you write poetry
Yeah. Thanks for asking. So is poetry out of the blue? Does it come kind of out of nowhere? Or have I planned something, or have I thought of something? I think both things happen with poets. The late, great Don Demansky, a fantastic Canadian poet, said that for him, the process is he has an idea at the beginning, that he'll write, and then there's the idea of like a subject, but then suddenly something else happens. That is, he writes about the beach, but then suddenly he's thinking about kind of the ocean, and then the depths of the ocean, and how those are barfed up on the beach somehow. Those aren't his words, but there's kind of this stream, a sort of like stream of consciousness, or a sort of looseness of associations that then emerges as you write. So something's discovered, and then the poem's not about that one thing. The poem is about the associations and the connections and the way kind of the mind and heart work together in these ways that aren't explained well in, say, an essay, or even the way that I'm doing it now. It's that layer of feeling and the weird kind of connections that put us in the state of like, oh yeah, there's this, it's all kind of connected, if that makes sense. Now, on a practical level, I do have ideas. I'm like, oh, I should write a poem about this, or oh, I met for coffee with a former student, Ford. His name is Ford, and so we were talking, and then he said affordable, and then he said another word that had Ford in it, and I didn't give him a prompt because I'm not his teacher anymore, but part of me is like, Ford, go home and write a poem where every word has Ford in it, and so there are concepts, there are ideas that you have, and sometimes you try them, but they may not work. So I think it's fair to say you can do both. Like, you have a great idea, keep your eye out for bigger ideas, but then also be open to those like lines or images that just start, that you just write down and then create something, and something emerges on its own. Yeah, thanks for asking. Awesome, thank you.
And you were an advisor of the Surrey Muse Art Society Art and Literature Awards. Yeah. Nice logo for you.
This is what will come in the day. This is what should have come in the day.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And let's just straighten up this puppy. All right. Well, that was wonderful, Kevin. Thank you so much. And I'm wondering, you could be an opera singer. Have you been? Are you looking into it for the future, maybe? Just keep it into the poems. You get away. Next we have our featured author, Marian Dodds, who also brought that popcorn. Is that right, Marian? Did you bring the popcorn in that wonderful dish? And that, it's just beautiful. This is what I like in the gathering. These special touches. Helga, she would bring real plates. She'd be like, forget the paper plates. She'd bring real china. It was so nice. We hope that she'll continue now that we've started up again. All right, so Marian Dodds is a writer and an educator. Her work has been published in Emerge 18, BCTF Teacher News Magazine, Postscript, Above and Beyond, Canada's Arctic Journal, and Spiderwebs Unite. She has taught at public schools and universities, coordinated union social justice programs, designed curriculum, written for professional teacher publications, edited the BC Teachers Federation flagship magazine, Teacher, and she has volunteered in Africa and Central America. Most recently, she worked for 3 years in Ethiopia, a country famous for jailing journalists. She avoided deportation by becoming adept at self-censorship while blogging at Spiderwebs Unite. A 2018 graduate of the SFU Writer Studio and the TWS Graduate Workshop, Marian is currently completing a memoir exploring the existential underbelly of her time in Ethiopia. Her next project will juxtapose her late 50s and early 60s childhood memories with the rapid changes in Canada's Arctic. In 2002, Marian's work was shortlisted for Federation of BC Writers Creative Nonfiction Award, and it was selected as a second place winner for our own Susan Creed Award for Nonfiction. Woo!
And thank you so much for coming, everyone. Get myself sorted here. How many people have been to Ethiopia? No one. Well, you get a taste of Ethiopia's masala spice. It's called berbere. And I invented, my friend invented berbere popcorn. So you can get a flavor of Ethiopia, ingest a little bit of it afterwards. And I brought a copy of the book I self-published in 2016 of my blog. I was wanting to know what it looked, how it read from start to finish, because as you know, blogs, you read them backwards. So I thought I want to do this and produce a book so I can read my story from start to finish. And in that process, I realized how much, I knew I was self-censoring, of course, because otherwise I would have been deported. But then why would I go there in the first place if I wanted to be critical? That wasn't my role. So I started off going for 2 years, ended up 3, and then been back 3 times. So it's a place near and dear to my heart. And there was something that kept niggling away at me, like this existential underbelly of, well, what did I really learn from this whole experience? What was it really all about? And so much of this, I think, when you're doing reflective writing, I journal every day too. I have stacks of those stored away that are excellent for reference. Making sense and connecting dots from my childhood in Canada's Arctic. Like, what was it, the way I was raised, that caused me to want to go and do something like this? So here's a little taste. I'm sorry I can't perform the way Kevin did. I'll do my best. But that was awesome. Thank you. And thank you to Surrey Muse for the award, too. I was really honored to get the Susan Crean Award. She's a writer I admire, and her last book, her memoir called Finding Mr. Wong is absolutely astonishing, so I encourage everyone to read that, too. So the first piece I'm going to read you, I better set my timer. Okay. Start. It's called Boarding Schools. Our secretary pokes her head into my office and says, Adetona needs you to meet with a Ferengi, foreigner. After a quick tap on the gender director's door, I slip in and find my colleague sitting uncomfortably in Mekti's chair, his short, plump body perched behind her imposing desk. He's been made acting director during our boss's maternity leave, a role he told me he didn't want, but the higher authorities forced him to accept. A svelte 30-something white woman in a prim business suit sits at the table in front of the desk, her pen poised above a black leather folder cushioning a lined notepad. She introduces herself as a fellow Canadian, explaining she's a consultant for the charitable arm of a major Canadian corporation that intends to invest millions in boarding schools and scholarships to promote girls' education in Africa. Temi acknowledges me with a quick nod before returning to a circuitous story about how boarding schools have already been tried and failed, sharing an anecdote about one in a poor region recently closed by the government due to rampant sexual harassment of girls by the teachers and mismanagement of funds by corrupt administration. You must understand the Ethiopian context, he said to her. I sense he's called me in for backup. The woman scribbles bulleted points in her notepad while Temi and I weigh in, spelling out the ripple effects of of removing young girls from their traditional families and cultures, the likelihood of this exacerbating social unrest, and so on. But we want to stop child marriage and educate girls for a better future, the woman counters, citing United Nations gender goals. We explain how the official 5-year plan of our directorate is tailored to meet those goals through systemic solutions. Why What is it that these experts never start by asking what we're already doing? This is the first time Tammy and I have tag teamed, and we are on a roll. Citing insights from my 2 years' experience working as a gender advisor, I reinforced Tammy's points, emphasizing my respect for his perspective, grounded in his years of experience. I observe the woman's eyes glaze over as he continues his long circular stories. My mind is in overdrive. I bristle at this foreign intruder, at the arrogance of people with big money imagining they have solutions for complex problems on the other side of the planet. What experts did they pay to come up with such short-sighted solutions? How could this even be suggested? Do I dare speak up? As a fellow Canadian, I must tell you that I find the concept of boarding schools especially problematic. The woman slides her pen into its special slot in her leather folder, overlaps her hands, and stares at me. Back home, I continue, as you and I well know, Canada is in the middle of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission hearings, with the horrific impacts of Indian residential schools front and center in our news. I pause. I wonder down the road how your corporation would react to finding itself in the headlines with similar accusations. Tammy, sensing the woman's discomfort, suggests the secretary could bring coffee. The woman looks at her watch. I'm sorry, I have another meeting booked. Yes, there could be many issues with this, but we can discuss further, Tammy trails off as she moves towards the door. I imagine him calculating lost millions in his head and hope I haven't botched the opportunity. As we shake hands, he mumbles, however, the scholarships are possibly a good idea. No wonder Tammy doesn't want to be the acting director, I think. Almost every week, experts like this woman arrive with money in their pockets and heads full of solutions for gender inequality in Ethiopian schools. They know we are the gatekeepers. A recommendation from our director is step one in procuring the requisite purple stamp from the Minister of Education to begin any gender project in our sector. Once we politely usher her out, Tammy shuffles her proposal onto a high pile of papers on his desk and says, "Let me invite you for a good Ethiopian coffee." A block from our office building and down several steps, he ushers me through a narrow passage shadowed between two buildings, guarded by a woman dressed in traditional white clothing who crouches low in her stool in front of an elaborate coffee ceremony setup. We take seats at a small round table in the dim room, the air thick with roasting coffee and the fragrance of frankincense. The woman places a miniature black pottery incense burner on our table, along with the matching Jebena coffee pot, 2 tiny cups, and a woven basket spilling over with popcorn. Timmy pours us each a cup and smacks his lips with approval of the strong, sweet coffee. Then he says, "I never heard you have Indigenous people in Canada." He's surprised when I tell him I attended high school with Indigenous kids in Canada's north, that most of the pupils in my class were taken from their remote homes and forced to live in hostels run by the Catholic Church, that the girls were supervised by nuns and the boys by Catholic brothers and a priest. Just now, I say, because of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission hearings across the country, most Canadians are learning the truth about the horrific abuses and multi-generational trauma caused by government policies that separated Indigenous children from their families and culture. Aizosh, he says, shaking his head in disbelief. Sorry. I never would believe such a thing would happen in a country, civilized country such like Canada. Late that night, I tossed in my bed, revisiting my high school years. I can't recall our teachers ever discussing Indigenous history or culture. We teenagers attended classes, socialized at dances, and competed in sports teams. Otherwise, we were segregated. I remember asking an Indigenous classmate if she wanted to hang out at my place on the weekend, and my surprise when she said, "The nuns wouldn't allow this." "But what do you do all weekend?" I asked. I recall her saying they embroidered pillowcases, cleaned the residence, went to church, and did homework. It seemed so unjust, yet everyone just accepted this as normal. Activism wasn't on our high school curricula, but something simmered inside me. Later, at university in the early 70s, my papers about the negative impact of residential schools, the cruelty of being removed from family, had been met with surprise, good grades, and what I felt as indifference. Tossing and turning with insomnia, another memory surfaces. The aching loneliness of being sent to southern Ontario to live with my aunt, uncle, and cousin for grade 7, because Mom and Dad thought the quality of education in our far northern Arctic hamlet was inferior. Culture shock smacked me down the first day it snowed, when I proudly wore my smoked caribou mittens to school, and my classmates, sophisticated city girls in crinolines and bras, ran for me, holding their noses, shrieking, "Stinky mittens, stinky mittens!" I remember sobbing myself to sleep night after night, and the relief that came when family, after 7 months of pleading to come home, my cries were heard, and I flew back north into the cocoon of Mom and Dad, my 2 younger brothers, and our husky dog. I had been fortunate. For Canada's Indigenous children, uprooted from their families, their pleas went unheard. Their parents left bereft, and their lives and traditions irrevocably disrupted. So that's the first excerpt. How's my time? Volunteer conundrums. The young doctor's eyes glisten in the high noon sun when we happen upon each other on the dirt road next to our NGO office in Addis Ababa. It's her last day in the country. Though I barely know her, I pause to ask her how her year of volunteering in a rural hospital down south had been. Why I bothered is beyond me. It was a complete waste of time, she blurts, a mix of anger and anguish spilling out in gasping sobs. No one listened, no one cared. If only they had let me, I could have done so much more. I tease the dust with my sandal, blinking fast to mask the tears that often come when I witness another's pain. Yes, I know. This volunteer work is really hard, I say. That exit interview is such bullshit. I don't think anyone gives a damn why I came here. They just keep repeating, no, you did a lot, you did a lot. Right now, it may seem hard to see, but once you're home, you'll have time to process the whole thing, to realize what you managed to accomplish under challenging circumstances. That's what everyone keeps telling me. She fishes a tissue out of her backpack. You know, I confide, sometimes my situation feels hopeless too. I've had sleepless nights wrestling with whether I should just go home, leave it all behind, and cut my losses. Really? I thought you were having a great experience from what I've seen and heard. Well, yeah, I try to remain positive, but believe me, my notebooks hear it all. It's easy to lose perspective in darker moments. This has been the hardest thing I have ever done, she wipes her eyes. I never thought it would end like this. Be gentle with yourself, I murmur when we hug goodbye, tears again welling in my eyes. Dozens of variations of this story, of feeling useless and underappreciated, collide in my head. Too many to deny, too many to be mere coincidence. A patchwork of crazy-making situations where one is assigned to do some task with colleagues who never have time to meet. Bizarre advisory committee meetings where one's efforts are first praised and then dismissed as impractical or unworkable in the ever-elusive yet regularly referenced Ethiopian context. Or the hurt of simply being left alone, politely ignored, and given little to do, of not being included as part of a team. Or being required to sit through day-long meetings with next to no translation, expected to understand, as if by osmosis, what people are saying. Volunteers vary in their responses to such challenges. Some say stoic and determined. Some drink, some party. Some give up and go home early. Some go rogue and take on unsanctioned projects they know they can achieve with people who are eager to work with them. And some persevere, unable to give up an inner drive for completion, to achieve some sense of closure, however small that may end up being. Others act as if they're on an extended holiday, plan excursions all over the country, stretch their time off work to travel and sightsee, something unfamiliar and unaffordable to their local colleagues. Over time, most of us have dabbled in a little bit of all of this. The most disgruntled, though, become toxic complainers. banding together over beers on patios to criticize and vent, oblivious to eavesdropping spies at nearby tables. Who knows what stereotypes of foreigners are being reinforced by these reported conversations? All these people just come to our country to be tourists, not to help. Later, the complainers are surprised when, without any direct confrontations, reasons are found to send them home early. Younger women complain of rampant sexual harassment and dismissive attitudes, signaling that a woman couldn't possibly be as expert as a man in their field. Normally, I'm the only Ferengi commuting on the minibus, but on the rare occasion when a pretty young foreign woman has gotten on, I study the men's hustle as obvious as predictive text. It's refreshing here to be respected as an elder, though minibus and sidewalk conversations with friendly and polite strangers, always men, predictably meander towards requests for something. My strategy of showing interest in their culture, using my few key phrases of Amharic, and sharing a joke or two helps keep me on the bright side of light, despite the dust, grime, and pollution we all stoically endure. When I had encountered that young doctor on the dirt road, coming out of a contentious meeting at our NGO office, my energy had been at a low ebb. That night I lay awake, my mind swirling from the day, the situation tricky. On one hand, my experience meeting weekly with the staff as the volunteer rep exposes me to confidences from sincere and hardworking NGO staffers struggling with escalating workloads. Political pressure from conservative forces in England threatens budget cuts. The NGA is warned to expect a decrease in funding next year. Suddenly, managers who should have time to visit and support volunteers in the field are stuck in Addis at their desks, desperately writing proposals, hoping to secure alternate funding to keep the place afloat. Their jobs are on the line, and harsh criticism in black and white from the volunteers, whose work ultimately is the reason this NGO even exists, is causing people to get defensive and blame the messenger. On the other hand, volunteers arrive with a heady blend of high expectations, expertise, idealism, and compassion, tempered with the commitment to keep their hearts and minds open to manage the inevitable challenges of being guests in a foreign culture. At orientations, we exude the best of intentions, share stories of professional accomplishments, scramble to connect past dots, past overseas experience, on travel experiences to the here and now. Some are out of work back home, transparent about expecting to enhance their resumes with overseas experience. Some may be harboring dreams of adventure or romance. Others have sacrificed career advancement to be here, foregoing salaries for a year or more to work only for expenses, putting careers on hold. Every one of us has family and friends back home clamoring for news. No matter what, people become invested in saving face, telling the folks back home they did something useful. I too am part of this complicated, multi-layered melange. Trying to drift to sleep, I mumble my own advice like a mantra. Be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with yourself. Thank you. There's lots of good stories too. Questions?
I'm curious to know, when did you start writing in a diary, journal, and how have you found the process of transferring that material into writing, especially in regards to like over the course of, like if you started journaling at 10 or something?
I started journaling around 1984 because I have a closet with full, like all organized. A few years ago, I took all the boxes full of old notebooks and journals and all kinds of different styles and designs and organized them. And it was around 1984 that I really started to do it religiously, almost like every morning. And in Ethiopia, I had like 50 of those little like student exercise books that they sell in the corner stores. And yeah, they're invaluable for your own research on your own mind. What, like things I had thought, I couldn't have written the manuscript is done now and I've got an editor looking it over for me, but I couldn't have done that without being able to refer back to the real facts of what I remembered, because, you know, our memories are tricky. And so that was the 20 minutes. So it was really exciting because, like, for example, I had a villain in the first year, the dean of the college I was working at. I lived in the northeastern highlands the first year, and then they transferred to the capital for 2 years as a gender advisor. But in the north, yes, there was this corrupt and dangerous kind of guy. And so I was thinking, well, when did that thing happen to him that happened to him? And I thought, oh, it was perfect timing for the arc of my story. So there was lots of conflict in there, and a few little incidents I'd forgotten. I thought, oh, perfect. So I can really weave those in, and, you know, without faking it, up the drama. So, but then also wonderful details and nuances of little delightful exchanges with people on bus trips. Strangers on bus trips are always fascinating. And yeah, it was invaluable to have the journals, the notebooks. Other questions? Yes?
In the abundance of experience, did you identify like a through line that led you to identify certain things to include and other things not to?
When I was writing it, are you asking how, when I was?
Like going back to the journals and deciding what belongs in the memoir, is there like kind of a through line of things you identified that, okay, that detail fits?
Yeah, and what I kept doing was, the question is, was there a through line? How did I identify it through reading the journals? And yes, it was really uncanny almost, at the way things worked. Like, I was there 3 years. I came home both summers, like 1 year summer home, another year summer home, like these sort of 3 things, right? And then there was kind of a repetition. Each year there was a big road trip, right? And to weave in with all, like, Ethiopia has the most fascinating history, and all the cultures there are just amazing. I mean, they adopted Christianity in the 4th century. I mean, you know, this is a very sophisticated culture. So that's what, you know, I was able to sort of weave those in throughout. So what I've got this editor doing is saying, I've got 152,000 words. I need to cut this down. Where can I cut is the next step. But I needed a neutral person now who doesn't know anything really about this story. Just, she's read it all, and now we're going to start figuring out which things we can toss, because it's too long. But I had to get it out, because it was cathartic too. And I mean, I always have believed in the, you know, you have to have an examined life, being reflective on what you're doing and all of that. And as you can see with the Indigenous story, I grew up in the Arctic. I went to a school that was attached to residential schools. Higher in the Arctic earlier on, I was with Inuit people. So I was brought up with a very different, perhaps, worldview than many Canadians that haven't had the privilege of those experiences have had. And that colored how my passion for cross-cultural work. Yeah. Anything else? Yes?
You said something very important at the beginning. I thought you said you didn't go there to criticize.
Yes.
So that sort of non-judgmental attitude, I really respect that. I'm just wondering, you talked about activism somewhere in there as well. I mean, do you feel that the two are reconcilable, non-judgment and activism?
Okay, the question is, do I feel that being non-judgmental, as I alluded to at the beginning, and being activist can be reconciled? And I think so, but you always have to be interrogating yourself. Is it, you know, why am I saying what I'm saying or what I'm going to do? In Ethiopia at that time, there was a law that said NGOs could not do advocacy work or you would be deported. So that was a no-brainer. We couldn't do it. The government had decided that. All the NGOs had to work in partnership with the government, not you know, in trying to work around them and try to change things for people. And but yet the way we have been raised to be activists and advocates, it's a bit of a stretch sometimes to sort of pull that back and say no. And I mean, that's what I was saying when I say systemic solutions. We had a 5-year plan for gender and education, and that's what I was working with, not making up my own creative things to try to change everything for them. I was working with them side by side, not trying to, of course I injected my own spin on things, but I wasn't trying to change everything, their world, right? Ethiopia was never colonized. It's a very unique country. And that is a very important thing that people will tell you every day. So they're not interested in having someone else come there to sort of impose. Yes?
You talked a little bit at the beginning about self-censorship and working in a place like that where you're limited
Yeah.
to what you can say publicly, especially about the government. Did you find that that kind of self-censorship led into your journaling since you were dealing with that on a day-to-day basis?
That's a very good question. Did my self-censorship that I mentioned at the beginning enter into my journaling? A journal, I feel, is not a public document. It's a place where you can, spill out your emotions, vent, and that sort of thing. But mine was more personal. Was not something I'd ever want to publish anyway. But I mean, the whole thing, like sometimes this dilemma: should I stay? Should I go? This is so frustrating at times. All of that's in there, like a list of reasons to quit, reasons to stay. All those things are, things you wrestle with lying awake at night and then writing up in the morning with good Ethiopian coffee. And then, so the question of how I used the journals, they showed me, they reflected back to me my own emotional roller coaster, which was helpful to be able, and then the way I write, I usually end up writing myself into a positive space. Even if I'm spiraling downward, I end up making jokes and finding some humor in whatever the situation is, and that's what saves me. I think. But yeah, so the interesting thing was the blog, though, but the blog was so much fun because I knew my boundaries were very clear for myself. I'm not going to be saying anything in a blog that's going to get me in trouble. But that freed me, that was sort of a scaffold in a way that freed me to be very creative with it. And I played with it. I mean, I sort of was an investigative journalist. I did a whole blog on Ethiopian coffee. I told people what I was doing, like describing the work I was doing. And then I was delving into Ethiopian history, like the whole Battle of Adwa in 1896 when the Italians were defeated by the Ethiopians. This was huge, huge. It's a national holiday. So I'd research, work with the history teacher at the college on that. Things like that all happened. And so the blog was a wonderful outlet for me to tell stories, share stories that were appropriate, and people loved it. Diaspora Ethiopians would send me messages about thank you, because the other thing is I did not take, and it's full, there's 1,700 pictures in it. I did not take pictures of, poverty porn kind of pictures. I'm telling you stories about real people that I interacted with, and what I was learning as I went along. So it was a very, very rich experience. But then I had some really upsetting experiences too with the evil dean, for example. And but it was again, what's in his head? Why is this going on? There was corruption for sure that I had to cope with. But that's not what goes in a blog. That's what goes in a memoir. Anyway, thank you very much. Oh, thank you. Lovely.
Well, that was fascinating and empowering, actually, for me. It's break time for us. All that food over there. It's going to be 15 minutes. Take your time. And then we'll have our featured performer and open mic. So don't forget, all you folks, open mic, sign up.
Where's the one you had?
That's all we need.
No, where's,
Whew.
and he's next, right?
It's not much to sit down, but you can sit down and but it's very small. But it's but there's a lot of
Mark usually, yeah, that's what he
Cares about that. I'm going to at some point. In the course of a
does.
semester.
Surrey Muse. And is that him? Because that might not have been the way, because you don't come up. I think he was over there.
Wait, I'm
also, our featured artist, Omokanye Adetona, we haven't been able to contact him for Skyping. This is their artwork on the cover, by the way. And they're also one of the winners of the Surrey Muse Visual Arts. So we're gonna move forward to emerging musician Hayley Verrall, and I'll introduce her now. Hi, Hayley. Can
Hi,
you?
can you guys see me?
Yes. Oh, can you see us?
Perfect.
You can see
I
us if you.
can.
Excellent.
The audience.
Okay. Let me introduce you. Hayley Verrall is a pop country artist from Burlington, Ontario, who is inspired by roots artists like Dolly Parton and Shania Twain, and more contemporary artists like Miranda Lambert and Gabby Barrett. Her voice delivers observations, inspiration, and encouragement about life, love, and the world, as does her most recent single, Side of Small Town. Hayley has presented her original music to open shows for work with and alongside iconic Canadian musicians such as Dan Hill and Burton Cummings. In 2021, Hayley was named the 2020 inductee to the Burlington Performing Arts Center Hall of Fame. Woo! While in 2022, she was recognized by the International Singer-Songwriters Association with the Silver Award for International Female Emerging Artist, and she received an honorable mention for the Faith Nolan Awards Music for Surrey Muse Awards as well. Please welcome Hayley.
So I'm gonna run through my first couple songs, and then I'll kind of talk about them. And if you have any questions, please be sure to ask me. I always want to answer questions, especially about songwriting, and I hope maybe some of you in the audience are musicians as well. So my first song I want to share with you is one I wrote called I Guess That's Love, and it kind of talks about just going through that thick and thin. Love always can't be you don't know me, I am in Burlington, Ontario right now. I wish I could be there in person, as I've never performed in British Columbia before. Maybe next time. Maybe I'll fly out or drive out. But I am in the lovely bedroom of my home in Ontario. This next song I want to share with you is a song that means so much to me. I wrote it because I felt in my life and the things I was doing and how I was progressing was a lot slower than others, and I really wanted to touch base on that and connect with so many people as possible. This song is called Late Bloomer, and if you connect with it at all, please let me know. I knew that I was different, was hard fitting in. There's some things you can't see when you're lost inside your head, like the sunrise in the morning, stars when you go to bed. If you're gonna put a label on it, well, this is who I am. I'm a late bloomer, it took me a little more time. A late bloomer, sometimes you gotta try a little harder than you think, 'cause nothing comes for free if you're anything like me. You're a late bloomer. Hard time on earth is short, so give it all you got. Don't be afraid, say anything you want. Spend your life believing it all happens for a reason. Might be hard to see it. Take it from me, I'm a late bloomer. Took me a little more time. A late bloomer, sometimes you gotta try a little harder than you think, 'cause nothing comes for free if you're anything like me. You're a late bloomer. Oh. It ain't easy, take longer. What doesn't break you makes you stronger. I'm a late bloomer. I'm a late bloomer. I'm a late bloomer. Took me a little more time. A late bloomer. Sometimes you gotta try a little harder than you think, 'cause nothing comes for free if you're anything like me. You're a late bloomer. Oh. Thank you. So I think that's my time in terms of performing some songs. So I would like to ask you guys, do you have any questions?
Give us another song, please.
Only if they let me. Am I allowed to, Michael and Miriam?
It was Bosie that spoke. The boss spoke. She asked for it.
Oh, no.
Pardon?
The big boss, Bosie recommended it.
Well, Hayley, I think you have, what, 10 minutes? But you know what? Please keep singing.
All right, I'll do another one. I'll do one called Slow Motion. So this one talks about just taking life in slow motion, because you'll miss moments like this, one like this, where I've never performed over Skype before and had someone someone dancing in the background, and I had such beautiful faces staring at me, but to the left of my screen. So not directly looking in my eyes. So this is called Slow Motion. All you can think about is growing up and moving out, chasing those dreams, but it ain't all it seems. First cop, first love, first time you got down, don't blink twice, it'll all be gone. It can feel so slow, waiting on tomorrow, but enjoy the moment, 'cause time is borrowed. Can't get it back, can't press pause, don't let it go. Start living in slow motion. Whoa, slow motion. Yeah. Crazy how those dreams get hit with reality, getting pennies for your time, just paying out dimes. Should be the best years of your life, so live it up, enjoy the ride, don't blink twice, it'll all be gone. It can feel so slow, waiting on tomorrow, but enjoy the moment, 'cause time is borrowed. Can't get it back, can't press pause, don't let it go. Start living in slow motion. Whoa, slow motion. Yeah, don't blink twice, it'll all be gone. It can feel so slow, waiting on tomorrow, but enjoy the moment. It can feel so slow, waiting on tomorrow, but enjoy the moment, 'cause time is borrowed. Can't get it back, can't press pause, and let it go. Start living in slow motion. Whoa, slow motion. Yeah, start living in slow motion. Whoa, slow motion. Yeah. Thank you. Now, if you haven't followed my Facebook page yet, or anywhere that Surrey Muse has been so amazing to post about, please make sure to follow, because all those 3 songs that I did perform today are going to be releasing this year. And I guess that's love. I guess you know what? You're going to be the first audience to hear it. I guess that's love is going to be releasing sometime in February. So make sure to please be following me on social media to be able to get the song when it drops.
Hayley, you got some pipes. Whew,
Thank you.
that was lovely. You know, those notes were hitting inside, right? I was about to pull up somebody and start dancing with them.
I wish you did.
I think I should have too. I was thinking, you know, because one of our featured presenters it didn't make it, we could ask a couple of questions before we let Hayley go, and then we'll hear from Veronika. Does anyone have any cues for Hayley?
Do you have any questions for me?
How long have you been doing this?
I've been performing live ever since I was a young girl. I started in the church and in the church choir, and then I went to a lot of bluegrass and country festivals and sang at jams. but doing music professionally and pursuing it as a career, I only really started pursuing it as a full-time career about 5 or 6 years ago.
Sorry, and what made you focus on it, Hayley, and what were you doing before as a focus? Where you may have.
So I was just doing music kind of just because I loved music. My dad was always a barber shopper. But how I found my purpose in music was one year my dad's mom, so my grandma, was suffering from a stroke, and seeing how it really affected her and how she taught my dad to sing when he grew up, I decided to pull out my guitar and I started singing, and seeing the look on her face and how all of a sudden she got better, I knew that's when I had to do music, and that's what I had to do. So not only am I doing like festivals and bar shows, but I'm also really focusing on retirement homes and nursing homes and singing classic country there.
So you write your own songs?
Yes, so all those 3 songs that you heard were all originals. I write songs because I like being able to express myself through music, and I find it's a whole lot easier than just sitting here and talking.
Do you ever sing other people's songs?
Oh yes, I do all the time because I get jealous. I wish I had written one of those songs.
What's one song you wish you had written?
Oh, don't get me started. I could give you a whole list. A lot of Dolly Parton songs I wish I'd written, you know?
Excellent.
They're just so good.
Thank you so much, Hayley. We'll just give you a round of applause.
Thank you so much.
How did it blur like that?
Yeah.
Ooh. Excellent. Enjoy your afternoon. Thank you again, Hayley.
No problem. Thank you guys so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, let's turn this puppy off for a second.
Oh, no, he's there.
Who's there? He's there?
Who's there?
When did that happen fast?
Just a minute ago.
Let's give it a moment. Well, that's big news. Woo.
No, what you done? Oh, now you done it. Won't work now.
It won't? Okay, hold on. Hold it.
Where's the button?
Hold it down. Oh, it's coming. It's coming.
Okay, 1 second. Should I bring him on screen first?
You can do it. I'll talk. Omokanye, we don't have a bio for them yet, but I think their art speaks for themselves, for itself. I mean, where are they from? Do we know that much? They'll tell us.
They are actually local from here, but right now he's traveling to Ontario, so
Area code 647, I do recall that for their phone number. That's just too bad we don't have a bio.
but in that line it says that this is a documentary.
Right, featured art from the series Spiritually Fashionable. And they're the 3rd place winner of our Norval Morisso Award for Visual Arts. Yeah, I think that's it. Why does it keep blinking? Should I hold it, press it? Fudged it up. I'll tell you that doing these kinds of tech things, we've come a long way. We have way less issues than we did all the previous times. Helga can attest. I've also got a
As
new
we're in the middle of
partner.
an issue.
It's also because I have a new partner in crime. Usually it was just me. Oh gosh. At least it stopped blinking. Maybe then let's press this once.
I just did that.
Maybe we need the,
Converse amongst yourselves.
maybe we need the Marian or something. Where did he go?
Give me a call when you're back. Just call. Use 26
Then let
minutes.
me,
He's almost there.
we'll
I've gotta
troubleshoot
get
this
Yeah,
while
yeah,
we hear from the Ooh, all right. While we troubleshoot this.
Start over.
Oh. There we are. No, not that. Let me introduce Veronika Gorlova instead for now. Our emerging writer. Woohoo! Veronika Gorlova is a queer, autistic, Jewish poet and writer living on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, also known as Vancouver. She immigrated to Canada from Ukraine when she was 5 years old and has lived across many parts of the country. She received an honorable mention for the 2022 Susan Crean Award for Nonfiction, and her work can be found in Emerge 22. Welcome, Veronika. Woo!
Thanks, Mariam. I'm really grateful to be here along some very talented writers and artists. And Kevin's actually my mentor from the Writer's Studio last year, so it's a special treat to be able to read with him today. And even though I am his student, I do not perform poetry like Kevin does, so it's going to be a little bit different. I'm actually going to read two pieces today, and the first is going to be a poem. And this poem is from a chapbook that I am currently working on that kind of explores how we shape our identities through myth-making and memory and exploring our family histories. So this poem is called Echoes. I move so I can make poem out of my body. Stomach clamping, earthquake epicenter, magnitude 7.9. I cry so I can leak poem out of my body. Endless river network, bottomless headwater. When I told you I didn't know if I was capable of being happy, I didn't mean I wasn't trying. I fall so I can shake poem out of my body. Grip floor, accordion limbs, take up less space, force poem out of my body. Once, my father drove a tank to a precarious tilt on a hill, had to get out delicately so it wouldn't become his coffin. Sometimes, I feel like I'm living in that moment. Sometimes I'm my father. Other times, I'm the tank. I provoke so I can tear poem out of my body. Moil muscles, tender, trigger tormented recall, teeter on the edge of pain and oblivion. When I told you I didn't know if I was capable of being happy, you said it was bullshit. To prove you wrong, I left you for someone who shattered me. I love so I can tempt poem out of my body. Knotted flesh, shallow depths, precarious pretenses. When I told you I didn't know if I was capable of being happy, I knew what, but I didn't know why. Now, I know why, but I don't know how. I scream so I can scare poem out of my body. Mouth agape, nightfall oozing out of hollows. Poem is ache, wound, history. My body's history, cyclical, ancestral. I'm here, stuck in a tank, about to roll down a hill. Thank you. And the second piece I'm going to read is actually a nonfiction piece. And it's interesting because this piece started as a poem, as all of my writing does, but it didn't want to be a poem. It was very stubborn, and I realized that I can't actually make this into a poem. And it was one of the only nonfiction pieces I've written last year, so it was a really nice surprise to get an honorable mention for the Susan Crean Award. And just for some context, so the piece is called A Letter to Lisa Banfield. And for those of you who don't know, Lisa Banfield is the former partner of the mass murderer in Nova Scotia. And I was reading a lot of articles about what happened and about the investigation into what went on, and I was getting really frustrated because of the public scrutiny that Lisa Banfield was getting and suggestion of her involvement, especially because she went through a lot of horrific things, and she was with him for 10 years and was a victim of domestic abuse. So I wrote this as kind of a letter for her, as a letter of support. Lisa, I don't know what to say. Sorry doesn't cut it, in that it doesn't have teeth or daggers, no sharp edges and apologies. Sorry isn't enough. Sorry is nothing, just an eyelash that we wish upon. But I am sorry. I'm so, so sorry. Sorry that we failed you, that we keep failing you, that we're failing you so badly, we've decided that it was in fact you who failed. The cruelty of the collective still surprises me. I know that it shouldn't, that I should be used to this by now, but I still fall for it. I do. This preaching about progress, that things are different now, that they're better. Sometimes I put on those rose-colored glasses only to learn they've been stained with blood, and it makes me sick to my stomach. I wonder what you think about that, our notion of progress. I wonder what you were thinking when we put you up on that stand to answer for the crimes of your abuser. I bet the last thing that you were thinking was that things are better now. I don't want to tell you that you're strong, even though you are. You're a monument. But I don't know if you feel like you have a choice. It's cruel, this obligation to be strong. Sometimes I'm so tired, I have to fight myself to get up and go to the bathroom. So tired that I'm afraid to turn on my phone, afraid that the world is going to ask too much of me, or not ask anything of me at all. And I don't know which one is worse. This pain of being dismembered by a person who is supposed to love you, it's a sinkhole that keeps opening back up. It's a miracle it hasn't swallowed us all. I'm sorry you haven't been given the space to be tired. No, I'm furious. Your obligation to be strong is an outrage. About the blame, I have no words. What I mean is, I don't have the right words, in the right order, at the right time. You're being punished for not dying. There's no other way to say it. Anyone who works with victims of abuse knows the phrase, "It was not your fault." It's the first thing that I write in my list of daily affirmations, and it took me a long time to start believing it. Sometimes I still don't. So what does it do to a person when they're told the opposite? I don't want to speak for you, but if you're anything like me, you already thought it was your fault. Sometimes I play detective with my history, go back in time to search for the exact moment where it went wrong. I think I'm looking for proof that I could have stopped it, as if I was in control. But I wasn't, and neither were you. It wasn't your fault. Any of. You hear me? None of it. Don't listen to them. Don't let them amplify the echoes of the most agonizing thoughts in your mind. They just want someone to blame, but that person is dead, and you're still here. I want you to know that you don't need to prove anything to anyone. The fact that you survived is enough. The fact that you're getting up every day is enough. I'm so glad you survived and that you keep surviving, despite the lack of space you have been granted to do it. I'm so glad you're still with us, and I'm heartbroken that there are people who think you have to apologize for that. I hope there's someone in your life who told you that, who tells you that on a daily basis. I want you to know that there are many of us out here, many of us who have been in that room of fear, who have been hidden by the pain of privacy, who have woken up from decades-long nightmares only to relive them again when we go to bed at night. We see you, we feel you, we know you. You are a part of us, and there are parts of us that love, that laugh, that thrive. I promise you, those parts are yours as well. I promise you, they haven't been destroyed. I promise you, you will get them back. Thank you. That's it. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer. Yes.
How did you know that the second piece was not a poem to make that transition?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I don't know if I have a very helpful answer for you, unfortunately. I think it's just something that you have as an intuition. I'm sure a lot of writers understand, even like when you're working with poetry, for example, and you kind of know what form it's supposed to take, but you don't necessarily know why. I think I was really trying to force that second work into being a poem, and it wasn't working. And at one point I realized maybe I shouldn't force this and do what it kind of wants me to do instead. It's almost as if the work leads you in a way. But yeah, I'm not sure that answer is super helpful, but it's sort of kind of like listening to your intuition and how you're working with things.
We're not going to send that poem to Lisa Barrett.
Actually, someone asked me this question a couple weeks ago, and I'm not sure. But maybe since you're the second person who's asking me that, maybe I should.
Veronika, could you repeat the question back?
Oh yeah, absolutely. She asked if I was going to send my nonfiction piece to Lisa Banfield, and yeah, so it's the second time someone's asked me that. I guess I should contemplate that a little bit more.
What?
Oh.
Go ahead, Ken.
Well, it's a question you're going to ask you afterwards, but I'm curious. So you came out of a program last year where you had to write every,
Yes.
right, this intensive, and you're taking another program now. But how do you write outside of those kind of structured moments? And how does it, I know you, Natalie Diaz, and there are other writers that you draw lots of inspiration from, but what does it look like? What's Veronika's kind of schedule in terms of creative practices?
That's also a good question. I try to have a goal of writing 1 to 2 poems a week. It's not necessarily scheduled because I don't follow that schedule. If I do, I find if I try to force myself to write something, it doesn't really work. But I do go through a lot of experiences on a daily basis. I read a lot. Sometimes I read 2 to 4 books a week. It's I almost devour literature, and I do get quite inspired by reading other poets in particular. And so the Echoes poem, for example, I wrote that at a time where I was reading Isabella Wang's Pebble Swing, and she has a lot of interesting work in that collection about her family history and how it affects her. And so that clearly was kind of in the back of my subconscious at the time that I was writing Echoes. And I think that just really taking in other artists' work and being able to have the day-to-day experiences and kind of integrating that is very, very helpful. Thanks, Kevin. Thank you.
Let's see if we can still Skype with Omokanye.
but introduce yourself a bit before you start, and then when you're finished, we'll have 10 minutes of questions with you.
All right. Before I go ahead, do I need to share my screen, or you already have my images projected on the screen already?
Yeah, we're good.
Know your images. I did not project them.
Yeah, no, it's on the screen. No, he doesn't have to do anything. He's good.
His artwork is.
Oh. I see.
Hello?
Do you have them?
No, I didn't.
No, we don't have them, so if you have them to share your screen, that'd be great.
Okay, fine. I'm really, really happy to be here tonight to tell you people about myself. My name is Adetona Omokanye, and I'm a visual artist. I'm originally from Nigeria, and I just relocated to Toronto, Canada. My visual art, I started off as a photographer. I shoot for NGOs and likes of United Nations, WFP, and the likes. I shoot for news agency as well, Bloomberg and CNN, Al Jazeera. But to come it off, while I was shooting as a photojournalist, I realized that this kind of story I am telling is not actually I really want to project by images. So I switched to mixed media, where I use photography to tell stories about Africa, about my culture, about my tradition. So for the past 3 years now, I've been able to, I won Getty Image award on my disability stories, and as well with my spiritually fashionable, I've won Lens Culture in UK that I'll be exhibiting on soon. So I don't know if you guys can hear me, so I feel it's one way, so I'm kind of wondering, can you guys hear me? Just say hi.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. So moving on, while I was shooting as a photojournalist, I have a project to document a cultural festival in a place in Lagos called Badagry. And while I was there, the intention was to document the cultural practice for historical purposes, like to archive those images. And but then on getting there, I realized that there's so many things that actually people are not saying about Egungun, which is referred to as masquerade. And while I was shooting, I was just so attracted to how fashionable those masquerades were looking. And immediately I switched my orientation as regards to what I'm supposed to do. Then I started taking portrait images of those masquerades. For I have 50 to 30 series that range of portraits of each masquerade. Then I archive it in my iDrive. So I was also commissioned to tell a story about a fashion parade in Lagos. While I was at that event, I started shooting, the fashion parade, and immediately the story just clicked in my head that the spiritual gathering, which is the Egungun festival that happens once every year in Badagry, Lagos, Nigeria, it's aside being a spiritual gathering, I feel that it is also a fashionable scene that I need to actually draw people attention to, because what they know more about the Egungun is more of their spiritual being, how the worship of the old ancestors, that just to like a remembrance of the old ancestors and all of that. So I decided to juxtapose the fashion parade and the masquerade just to tell more story on how contemporary African fashion styles have evolved or changed, or what can I use, over time. There's a similarities between African fashion styles and the masquerade, and that is what I portrayed in those images. So I think you guys were able to, I don't know if you hear what I'm saying. I don't know.
Omokanye, you know what? We will do it
Yeah.
here. We will go to your website and share our screen.
Okay.
Give me a second.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Can you tell me what the URL there is, Michael? Yeah.
Oh, can you see my screen?
Oh, we see it. Yay. Hold on, this is better then. How do I get there?
Just close the browser.
Can you see my screen?
There you go. Yeah.
I'm currently sharing them on my screen. I don't know, maybe it's visible alive.
We can see it. Woohoo!
Okay. Yeah, so this is the visual work that and how I achieve those works where I use illustration and Photoshop to do a little bit of photo manipulation by strategically positioning those subjects, the egogun and the fashionistas, on a unique canvas. So this project to me, it's more original, it's more authentic. This is how I really want to portray the African story. This is how I want it. Yeah, that's basically it. The intention is to, the intention is to, my choice is to just juxtapose and make male masquerade with a female model as a complement in my digital collage in a deliberate attempt to create a gender-based antithesis, So that's it for now. I hope you guys enjoy the view. Thank you.
You have to see this person.
Yes.
I'm
Who's
right
the
here.
little one in the back?
Sorry, my daughter, she's just trying to come to me by all means. So allow me to allow her to be part of this event.
Let's open it up to questions from the
Yeah,
audience
please.
for you.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, let's be extra loud.
Just wondering, do your textures, patterns, are they Nigerian broadly or Yoruba specifically?
Did you hear
I
it?
didn't get that. No, I didn't get that, please. Can you put in the chat box? So I can
Oh,
read
the
it, please?
chat box. Actually, why don't you come closer? He's gonna come closer.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if your patterns and cloths, are they Nigerian more broadly or Yoruba specifically?
Sorry, say it again. Sorry.
Shall I type?
I'm glad that.
Your voice kind of things. I'm sorry. It's fine. and this story it's more personal, and the clothes where they are putting on is called a pu, which is like a garment. That's the word, and it is from Yoruba culture basically, and yeah, I believe that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, because the pattern itself is the pattern of the clothes. Sorry, it's originated. I would say it's from the Western world, but then the design it's indigenous. It's from Africa. It's our style of bringing stuff together basically, and then it's more like a spiritual garment for the masquerade, which is called the Egogo. Yeah. I hope that's answered your question.
Anyone else with a quick question? We got open mic after this. Yay, thank you so much. Your art is so vibrant. It's a powerful fusion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time.
All right. All right, let's open it up to open mic. It's our half hour event. And I want to thank the people who signed up to open mic. To begin, we have C. Elliott Mullins with the poem Drown. Here you are.
Hello. So, fun fact, I was also a student of Kevin's and classmate of Veronika's at the Writer's Studio. Yeah. So I'm writing a series of poems on the topic of addiction, and this one is called Drown. Do you remember what it felt like the first time you looked back and didn't see the shore? Ocean nipping at the tips of your fingers, piercing your skin, tinging the water pink. Watching your cells absorb into the vastness. Do you remember what it felt like to dissolve? Do you remember the first time the rushing river ran the waterfall of your veins, the burn on the back of your tongue? Can you taste it now? Do you remember how we got our shit together 7 times in 7 cities? 7 60-day chips lining the dash, 7 pay or vacates scotch taped to 7 doors. The soundtrack of our existence whispering, you're not gonna make it. Do you remember the picket fence we passed on because people like us can't live in places like that? The precarious progression of peril where we lived and you died. Do you remember the day we came apart, smoking in my car on your morning break while I told you we were losing the last house? Do you remember deciding not to cry because the break was only 10 minutes? Do you remember almost being snowed under, knowing you were supposed to be grateful, but wanting to ride 1 more millimeter into the magic? Do you remember the exact second you knew love was not a sufficient substitute for oblivion?
Thank you so much. Kevin, you can bring your students anytime. We should hear 2 poems per person. It's true, we should. Have you got another on hand?
Sure.
I love a person who delivers.
Pressure, pressure. Let's see. Some of them are really dark, as Veronika and Kevin know.
We can take it.
Okay, I'll give it to you then. This one is called I Was There When He Died. I was there when he died, smoothing thinned hair against his spotted scalp. He could not speak by then. They say lung cancer is like drowning in your own body. He would blink. Furiously, I would pat his hand and tell him it would be okay. He settled when I pulled my sister's face close and said, "We will be okay." He was the bearer of kittens and handkerchiefs, dolls at Christmas, runny yolked eggs stirred into gravy on Saturday mornings. Sunday was for church, but he wouldn't go. For 2 decades, full grown, I would come when summoned. He lingered far longer than was prudent for a 2-pack-a-day filterless camel kind of man. I won't tell you how he held me down, how I would wake, nightgown on the floor, drenched in shame, his breath sticky on my face, his shh obscene. Who would I tell? I was bereft when he turned his attention to other prepubescents. Though I was a late bloomer, my legs eventually too long, my words too wordy. The runny yolks remained. I gagged them down, relegated to the kitchen, rolling out biscuits, scrubbing cast iron, a slap to the cheek when I asked if it was a sin to feed chicken bones to the hens.
Wow, that was worth it. Ooh. Thank you. Okay, so we only have one more person, Helga Pore, who's gonna, I'm so happy to hear you. It's been so long. Come on up. What? Oh, right, here. Helga, remember to stand here and speak into the microphone.
Well, everybody has been.
But me. And it's your last chance to sign up for, oh, I have.
So, no, I haven't been taught by Kevin Spenst. So,
I was taught by you. You ran a workshop, and I was.
yeah, well, you were there as a helper or something.
There is a Kevin connection.
Anyway, this is called Attachments, and oh, I forgot to bring the little paper. It was long listed in the Federation, blah 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 blah, in New West. So anyway, I was happy about that. It seems to be 1 out of 10. I didn't know that was called long listed. I thought long listed would be 1 out of 1,000 or 100 or something. And then shortlisted is 1 out of 5, and then I didn't know that, but anyway, I was very happy. So it's called Attachments. Okay, you'll get it. Those milk dripping taps for some. Those flabby constructions needing to be tamed into tents of sorts for some. Those soft, supple mounds for a lover's hand to please. For some, the caress of a child's gentle touch. For some, that piece of equipment to tease with. For some, that annoying, swinging, gets in the way, useless pieces of shit made of dense tissue that has to be prodded regularly to check for irregularities. Those 2 humps that have to be placed between 2 pieces of metal to find anything faulty, grisly, not the choicest meat. If suspect, poked by many hands. Cut out, the lab report advises. Cut out, cut off. Do I want 1 or 2? Off, I say. Off. Take them both. Just take them so I can live. That's it.
Well, it feels so good to me. I'm going to be doing this every month. The Saturday, the 4th Saturday of each month, 1 to 4, same room, same time. I wonder we can end with a word for tonight, something that stood out for you, a color, a sound. Anybody? Need anything? Green. Oh, yeah, I'm green. Yeah, I don't know. I thought we could do some playful exercise before we go, because we do have 20 minutes before this room is done. Why don't we mingle amongst ourselves? Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.